Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to my RSD live stream. I created a program called ADHD Mindset Mastery to help me manage my own ADHD and to serve women who were late diagnosed with ADHD. So let's get into it with rejection sensitivity dysphoria and how I manage my big ADHD feelings when RSD rears her ugly head. So my name is Sara Kelly. I am a certified ICF life and health coach, and I found my passion helping women with ADHD reach their highest potential without overwhelm. Overwhelm is something that I have struggled with a ton having ADHD. I'm excited to share with you how I manage my own RSD as well as the ladies who are in my program. Rejection sensitivity dysphoria is the extreme emotional sensitivity and pain triggered by the perception that a person has been rejected or criticized by important people in their life. It may also be triggered by a sense of falling short, failing to meet our own high standards or others' expectations. A lot of people don't know this, but rejection sensitivity dysphoria can actually manifest as perfectionism, imposter syndrome. It can cause overwhelm. It can actually even cause us to freeze and not know where to start for fear of being judged. So it really is a massive umbrella that it can fall under. RSD can stem from both real and imagined thoughts or experiences. And so when a thought or an experience comes into our view, we are going to have feelings based on usually past experiences. Feelings create emotions, and emotions lead to actions, and actions have consequences. And this is where we really struggle as ADHDers because we do have issues around impulsivity. The consequences of RSD can manifest both internally as inner turmoil, depression and anxiety, and leading us to withdraw and miss out on opportunities. There are also external consequences that can arise from rejection sensitivity dysphoria and our innate unconscious desire that sometimes is geared towards reactivity. Our time together today will give you some additional tools to assist you when RSD rears her ugly head. What happens when we experience a situation that makes us start feeling the very painful phenomenon of rejection sensitivity, especially if we don't have the tools in our emotional toolbox to help us out? Many ADHDers fall into action reaction. Something happens and we have a reaction to it. Our brain, part of our executive dysfunction is we lack that filter, that simmer down part of our brain to sometimes take perspective on situations, to be able to step back and take a bird's eye view of a situation. So partly because of our past and how we were raised and nurtured, and we're going to get into that shortly. Partly our emotional dysregulation. We feel really big feelings. That can all lead to the effects of RSD. Part of an ADHDer's executive dysfunction is regulating big feelings, impulsivity. We also struggle with rigid thinking. So that's very black and white, very all and nothing. Everybody loves me, everybody hates me. I'm really good at everything. I fail at everything. And so just being aware that our brains do tend to default to more rigid thinking can invite that gray zone in. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. Reasons we might feel RSD is actual rejection. Not all rejection is imagined. You know, your feelings are valid and rejection does happen. And at a way higher rate for us as ADHDers, it can be imagine rejection, being teased or joked, letting others down. A lot of us are habitual people pleasers, and that makes a ton of sense because of the rejection that we felt in the past. We become these yes people who don't always have boundaries. We can beat ourselves up. No one will ever beat me up worse than I beat myself up with my own internal dialogue. And then criticism, even if it's constructive. And I think the reason that sometimes we get a little bit more sensitive to criticism is because we're almost waiting to get criticized. And just to tell you a little side story that is more of a physical phenomenon for me than an emotional one. When I was a little girl, maybe, 6 or 8 years old, I dropped a pot on my foot. It wasn't a hot pot or anything, but my toenail turned black and I lost it. And that was, many, many years ago. I'm 47 right now. So let's say, 38 to 40 years ago. I still, to this day, if I drop something, even if it's a pillow, I jump back like it's a pot. It's just become this reflex to me. So when you think about RSD and possible rejection that we felt in the past because of our ADHD, it's understandable why we would be jumping to our back against the wall and how am I being attacked or hurt or something, because we do deal with a lot more of rejection than neurotypical people do. And so before we continue anymore, I want to validate you and your feelings, whether the pain of going through RSD is actual rejection or just something that we have fabricated in our own mind, perceived rejection. We can feel pain in those moments. Your feelings are valid. The pain that you are going through is very valid. And I think that that's important to say, because a lot of times we get this feedback of, oh, you're too sensitive and you can't take a joke. And why are you always jumping to conclusions? Again, just that awareness that ADHDers, our default is black and white thinking. That can, just knowing that about ourselves, if you do struggle with that, that can get us to step back and say, okay, where is the gray zone? This doesn't have to be all or nothing or black and white. So let's take just a couple of moments to talk about how not to cope with RSD first. And I'm not doing this to insult any of your intelligence, but it's important to, just bring this to light, because I know that I have fallen into a ton of this myself before I really started learning how to step back and pause and go through some of the tactics that we're going to talk about today. RSD can lead to impulsive action. Angry emails or texts, raising our voice at someone, leaving a situation angry and driving. Never do that. That is very, very dangerous. Saying something hurtful, and even suicidal thoughts or ideology. Suicide is never the answer. Please, if you are feeling so down that you are contemplating that, please seek out the help of a suicide hotline or a mental health professional. Because that is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And so these are examples of ADHD action reaction, the emotional versus the logical brain and ADHD. And so I really want you guys to really embrace this the way that I have, because it has absolutely been the game changer when it comes to me dealing with my RSD. ADHD and the emotional brain, action reaction, right? Because of our impulsivity and our traumatic past, a lot of us with having ADHD and the rejection that we felt from so many, especially during our formative years, ADHDers lack the self-regulating system that neurotypical people have. Emotional dysregulation is common for those of us with ADHD. We have also experienced more negative feedback than others do, especially during our formative years. We're also more known for rigid thinking, black and white. In other words, someone not responding to our tests can lead us to thinking they must hate us. At least for me. I'm not accusing anybody. This is a lot of my introspection and the women that I've interviewed to build the program that I have. And so with action reaction, we struggle with impulsivity, emotional dysregulation. You will see on the next slide that there are good reasons why we would more easily be subjected to big feelings of rejection next to our neurotypical counterparts. Please let me know if anything on the next slide resonates with you. So what are some of the things that you were told growing up, and what are some of the things that maybe you're still getting feedback on? This is based on about 75 women that I've interviewed, as well as my own personal experience. You have so much potential if only you would focus, apply yourself more. You're messy, you're outspoken, you're just not smart, you talk too much, you're a daydreamer, you're not dependable, you're stubborn and disobedient. And one that I got a ton growing up that really feels like a rusty knife entering my heart is you're too much. Being told that was probably the hardest thing that I went through because especially before I found out that I knew I had ADHD, I knew that I was different. I knew that I could be too much, and being perceived that way really did affect my sense of self and my self-esteem. And so this is just a very interesting Googleable stat. By the time a child with ADHD is just 10 years old, they will receive, on average, 20,000 pieces of negative feedback. So if you go through your life being told that you're a daydreamer, that you're too much, that you're too rambunctious, or anything in between, it is so understandable, kind of like that phenomenon that I explained to you of the pot dropping on my toe and me still jumping back even when I drop a pillow off my bed when I'm making it in the morning, that we are going to default to, I'm not good enough, I'm being rejected, they must be out to get me. It is natural. I hope that this slide validates your feelings, going through the experience of being an ADHDer, because it certainly did for me learning these stats. ADHD and utilizing the logical brain invites us to take space from action reaction. What if you were able to give just as much attention to the logical part of your brain as you do the emotional part of your brain? Because when we have emotions, we are not in our logical brain. We are not always grounded in reality. And yes, Charles, I'm just taking a quick peek at the chat. Trauma absolutely adds and exasperates this. Absolutely, this is so valid. And so this is my little teeter-totter. If there is anybody in this chat that does graphic design that would like to send me as a gift a better teeter-totter for me to update my slide deck, I would most definitely appreciate it. I am definitely not an artist, and maybe this is where a little bit of my RSD comes out. And so if we think about the emotional part of our brain and the logical part of our brain, and I'm not at all accusing all of you to be here, but a default when we're not practicing mindfulness can be that we give our emotional brain a lot more weight, a lot more attention than our logical brain. And so I hope that our time together today will invite you to start balancing out the scale or the teeter-totter to give your logical brain as much or at least some attention while you're feeling the effects of RSD and you are trapped in your emotional brain. So let me share with you the secret sauce of how I get there and how my clients have been able to get there. And this is becoming the detective to your internal narrative and your RSD. And I just want to give you an example of a detective, a good detective versus a bad detective. So if I were to become a detective and do all the schooling and get hired by whatever police force and get called to a crime scene, I would have to go to that crime scene and be very analytical. I would be dusting for prints. I would be talking to people of interest and getting alibis. I would be swabbing people for their DNA. I would be looking at motives. It would be a very analytical process. I wouldn't go into a crime scene and say, well, it looks like the person who had the crime done to them, like they weren't a very good person. They probably deserved it. I feel that maybe they weren't a good person. Or as I was interviewing suspects, I would not be saying, well, I think the person who has more tattoos is probably the criminal. The other person looks very clean cut. Or the person who doesn't have as good of a job, like my feeling is they could be the criminal. It would be a very analytical process based on evidence. So inviting the detective, that logical brain, into your internal narrative, because we're constantly talking to ourselves all the time. That is what exasperates the RSD, is that internal narrative, can really help us step back, or at least it's really helped me step back. And so some of the things that you might be saying to yourself when you're in the midst of RSD is, no one likes me, I fail at everything, nothing ever works out for me, everyone else has it so much easier than I do. So the emotional brain and the logical brain with ADHD, when we're saying these things to ourselves, we're very much sitting in that emotional brain. And again, like the pot dropping on our toe and some of the things that we were told as children, plus our brain chemistry, our emotional dysregulation, it makes sense that we are going to sit more in that emotional brain because we're creatures of habit. But I am inviting you to try to give as much attention, or at least start moving the needle in the right direction, to invite that logical brain, that detective, that analytical entity into your train of thought when you're feeling RSD. Because all of those previous statements are blanket statements. And yet, how many of us buy into these blanket statements that we tell ourselves? It's very human nature. If you can resonate with this, please add something to the chat. And so becoming the detectives to our internal narrative with RSD can bring a little bit of that logical brain into our sight, into our headspace, where so much of our emotional brain is usually taking over the real estate of our brain. And so no one likes me is obviously a huge blanket statement. Getting curious about that. No one on the entire planet likes you. You can see that like something like nobody likes me is a huge blanket statement. I fail at everything. Is that true for you, or are you failing at something today? And failure gets us that much closer to success, by the way. I'm just going to plant that seed. It's all about perspective. And so I fail at everything. You have never succeeded at anything in your entire life. Again, blanket statement. Nothing ever works out for me. Nothing has ever in your entire life worked out for you. Or are you just having a season right now, or something going on right now where things aren't working out? Everyone else has it so much easier than I do. I know that I have said that to myself in the past. And, you know, when we just have to watch the news and see how many war-torn countries there are, how many places where women still don't have rights, ghettos in major cities, to know that everyone else has it so much easier than I do is not an accurate statement. It is a blanket statement. And so the blanket statements that we tell ourselves are absolute baloney, and they do become our confirmation bias. And so confirmation bias is a term from the field of cognitive psychology that describes how people naturally favor information that confirms their previously existed belief systems. And so just going back to what we were told growing up, how many of these things have we adopted as, this is my reality, this is where I'm at, and now this is just going to become my self-fulfilling prophecy or my paradigm in life. Between the negative feedback that so many ADHDers hear in adolescence, and some of us even in adulthood, it is easy to understand why RSD, rejection sensitivity dysphoria, is prevalent for us. Plus, we have executive dysfunctions that affect our emotions and impulsivity. So I would say it is definitely a mix of trauma and also the chemistry of our brain. And so getting curious about your thoughts and the stories you tell yourself is huge. To be introspective when we are, feeling RSD, by inviting that detective in. And so what if the person you texted was not ignoring you and is just busy? What if the person that you texted that didn't text you back has ADHD and forgot to text you back? What if your boss wants to see you to promote you and not to fire you? What if the constructive criticism you received was to help you and not a personal attack on you as a human being? And what if you are perfectly capable of the task you have at hand? Be careful of perfectionism. I promise no one will notice but you. Look for the evidence and do some detective work. Is what you are feeling right now coming from your logical or your emotional brain? If the situation is work-related, how is your performance at that job? What kinds of feedback have you received in the past? If the situation is regarding a friend, what has that relationship looked like in the past? Is this friend normally someone who shows up for you? If they have a history of not being a good friend, then that is a boundaries issue. And remember, the best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. So inviting that detective in to take up a little bit of real estate in our emotional brain can really help us not have RSD be as debilitating as it can be. Pay attention to your body. When you start feeling triggered, try to feel in your body where that shows up. Catching this early can be very good and can help you move through RSD way quicker. Maybe you feel a lump in your throat, or you are feeling sick to your stomach, or maybe your heartbeat elevates, you start getting clammy hands. Catching this early can help you regulate sooner without suffering, because you have gone down the catastrophic vortex of the emotional rabbit hole. And so the power of the pause is another thing that you can practice when you're feeling RSD, and that is interrupting action reaction. Always wait at least 24 hours before responding to perceived or actual rejection. The worst feeling in the world is flying off the handle and then regretting it. I have done this and then had to apologize. It does not feel good. I am definitely a stick my foot in my mouth kind of gal when I am not being present enough to catch my own RSD. If you have the desire to send a text or an email, you can draft it in your notes to feel as though you're able to release the big feelings. Do not send it though, because we know cooler heads prevail. Having an opportunity to reread what you were thinking of sending after big feelings have simmered down gives you the opportunity to edit or delete what you might have sent in an angry or hurtful moment. So the power of the pause can be your best friend. Get busy doing something else while you are in the midst of your RSD big feelings. And you could, go for a walk, put on a movie. A great way to regulate your nervous system when you are in that fight or flight mode is to splash cold water on your face, or to get some frozen vegetables or an ice pack and put them on your face and your neck. Call a trusted friend to gain perspective. Now, what I would suggest is call a trusted, logical friend to gain perspective. You don't want to call someone who is going to add fuel or logs to your emotional fire. Take a nap. Sometimes just sleeping it off can feel really good. Send yourself a voice note or journal to get out those big feelings. Take long, deep breaths. Now make sure that they are slow so that you don't hyperventilate. Go get some natural dopamine by snuggling with a pet. Ask for a hug. Listen to your favorite song. Be gentle with yourself and the inner dialogue you are telling yourself. Another thing that you can do is the benefit of the doubt theory. And we kind of touched on this a little bit, a couple slides, when we assume that maybe we're not getting fired, we're getting promoted. We are so good at jumping to the worst possible scenario. This often results from all the trauma and negative feedback we receive because of our ADHD in the past, especially those of us who are diagnosed later in life. We are used to feeling judged and rejected. What if we balance the negative narrative with the possibility that we are not being rejected? It is important to remember that when you believe something, you fall into confirmation bias. Whether what you believe is fixated on true or false, if you adopt it as true, your brain will naturally look for evidence of your belief. This is really cool, guys. I welcome you to do a little bit of research on it if you're interested. The reticular activator system is part of our brain. It does a bunch of things, but one of the things that it does is it acts like a filter. And what that means is we will take in so much information on a daily basis that we couldn't possibly process all that information. So our brain acts like, horse blinders, where we only see what we're fixated on. And if you want some evidence of that, if anybody has been pregnant or gotten someone pregnant, or been in the vehicle, in the market for a new vehicle, and then you start seeing babies and pregnant women everywhere, or that new vehicle everywhere, there's not actually more of that thing during your season of life. It is your reticular activator showing you more of what you are focusing on. So if you're focusing on everybody hates me, or I'm always screwing things up, or feeling rejected, naturally your brain is been engineered, whether you're neurotypical or neurodivergent, to look for more evidence of what you are focusing on. Knowing a little bit more about the reticular activator was a game changer for me. So make sure you do a little bit of research on that if you want to make that your rabbit hole that you go down next, because it's very empowering to know that we can choose what we're going to notice more in life just based on our thoughts. And so a technique that you can do anywhere, and I would just really like to thank Amy Needham, she's on LinkedIn, for this, is a self-regulating technique. You can use your iPhone or your Android. And what you do is you breathe in for 4 seconds as your eyes are moving from corner to corner around the phone. Breathe out and hold for 4 seconds. And then you can continue to repeat that if you, until you are feeling regulated. Reducing triggers can be huge. Name the feelings you feel. This is not about sweeping our feelings under the rug. Your feelings are valid. We talked about this right in the beginning. I am angry. I am feeling rejected. I am feeling hurt. Naming the feeling and not adding extra friction to it by being frustrated that you're having the feeling will make the feeling pass way quicker. And you can do this by journaling, by, internal dialogue, sending yourself a voice note. Tune into the physical symptoms and start learning how to catch them early. That is a great way to not go down that catastrophic vortex where we're in our head and our emotional brain has totally taken over the situation. Get curious about the stories that you are telling yourself. With these blanket statements, if you were that detective and bringing in that logical brain, would that same story still be the reality you're sitting in? Reach out to a trusted and logical friend to gain perspective and see if it's possible to direct your attention elsewhere and revisit the feelings you are feeling in 24 hours. You can journal or leave yourself a voice note regarding that. Pay close attention to your self-talk. Is it kind or is it critical? If you're anything like me, I can be my own worst critic. And so just ask yourself, when you are being really, really critical with your self-talk, what is the end goal with this? Is this productive for me to be thinking this way? Or am I going to now be activating my reticular activator system to find me more proof of this negative self-talk? And then if all else fails, would you speak to your 10-year-old self the way you talk to yourself when you were being hard on yourself? And let's not forget that stat that I had put up earlier, how the average child by age 10 receives 20,000 pieces of negative feedback. Be your own cheerleader. Don't be another person giving you that negative feedback. Self-love and self-compassion are essential to living a happy and fulfilling life. Write out the feelings you are experiencing. It can be very cathartic. Embrace the feelings, that your feelings are allowed to be there and what you feel is valid, even if your rejection is completely fabricated in your own mind and the situation wasn't actual rejection. It doesn't take away from the fact that you're a human being with ADHD who has dealt with a ton of rejection in the past, and you struggle with emotional dysregulation and understanding that you have black and white, more rigid thinking than others do. Your feelings are valid. And then we can reframe. We're so good at saying what we don't want and what we don't like and all of these things, but what would you like to feel instead? Write out those feelings. Start getting curious about how you want to feel. So maybe if you're feeling rejected, you would like to start feeling accepted, and focusing a little bit more on how you do want to feel accepted and how you are open to inviting that into your life can help your reticular activator now look for those different things other than rejection. And so we are coming to a close in the next couple of slides, less than 5 minutes, and you guys will be out of here. There will be a replay available as well. You are valid. Your feelings are valid. The quickest way to move through big feelings is to name them and to allow them to be there without judgment. Feel where the effects of RSD show up in your body in the beginning stages so that you can be present enough to use the power of the pause before reacting. Cooler heads always prevail. Distract yourself by going for a walk, for example. Give as much attention to the logical brain as you do the emotional brain by becoming the detective to your negative thoughts. Be the detective to the blanket statements that you are telling yourself. Try the benefit of the doubt theory to balance your negative thoughts. Use the breathing box technique or an ice pack to self-regulate, and journal to release feelings. Utilize reframes to balance out those feelings. What would you like to feel instead is questions you should be asking yourself. And so if you are female and you were diagnosed with ADHD in adulthood and you would like to apply to work with me, I would suggest that you start off by watching my complimentary masterclass, ADHD Mindset Mastery. It is a mini version of my program. The link is on my LinkedIn profile. You can click on it anytime. At this time, I am not working with men, but I do feel like this masterclass has a ton of value. And so men are welcome to sign up and watch the masterclass as well. Thank you so much for coming. I'm going to take a quick look at the chat to see if anybody has any questions for me before I sign off. Us poor men, I know. And the reason that I'm working with women is because there are spaces where women feel safer talking about personal things. And, a lot of women have trauma around men. So for those reasons, I do work with women because we have to, and also ADHD shows up very, very differently in us than others. I have something on my screen right now. Oh my gosh, the RSD that I'm having right now is crazy. Okay, I don't see any burning questions. So I will end this live stream now. Thank you so much for coming to it, and I hope you enjoyed it. Please add to the comments how you are going to use some of the tips in this live stream to help you with your RSD. I hope you enjoyed it. And thank you so much for all the support on LinkedIn. You guys pushing my content and engaging in my content helps more people see me, and I truly, truly appreciate that. Have a fantastic day, everyone, and I will see you on the next one. I'll definitely be doing something like this again soon. Bye.